This morning, the Director of National Intelligence just detonated Washington with a disclosure that lands squarely on Donald Trump himself. At 9:00 a.m. today, inside a secure briefing room at the Capitol, the nation's top intelligence authority released findings tying Trump to previously undisclosed foreign intelligence contacts, documents spanning 17 classified assessments now formally referred to Congress. The fallout was immediate. Within minutes, senior senators rushed into emergency session steps from the Senate Intelligence Committee offices, while federal officials confirmed that Trump Tower is now explicitly named in a review never seen before at this level. This is the first time in U.S. history a sitting intelligence chief has publicly linked a former president's personal empire, an empire built over decades, an identity carefully cultivated, to an active national security exposure. When the intelligence community moves like this in Washington in daylight, it means the system has reached its breaking point. Hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss any of the reporting, analysis, and breaking updates in the videos I release as this story keeps unfolding. So, what triggered this unprecedented action? According to official briefings released today, the catalyst was a classified intelligence assessment formally transmitted to Congress by Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines on February 6, 2026, citing unresolved national security concerns tied to Donald Trump's post-presidency activities. That presentation, officials say, was compelled by statutory reporting requirements after internal review thresholds were crossed. Tensions have been building since mid-2024, fueled by a widening counterintelligence review examining foreign influence operations targeting U.S. political figures. That review intensified through 2025, as investigators flagged recurring patterns involving overseas financial channels and informal diplomatic back channels. But everything escalated on January 28, 2026, when intelligence analysts reportedly identified corroborating material across multiple agencies, triggering an emergency elevation of the findings to the congressional Gang of Eight. Key players moved quickly into position. The disclosures were delivered to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, chaired by Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, alongside Vice Chair Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. On the executive side, DNI Avril Haines coordinated with the National Security Council and senior officials at the Department of Justice, while career staff at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence handled the formal transmittal. Each of these institutions carries independent oversight authority, and their convergence is itself notable. According to briefing materials summarized by sources familiar with the matter, the assessment outlines alleged contacts between Trump-affiliated entities and individuals assessed by U.S. intelligence as linked to foreign intelligence services. The documents reportedly reference activity between 2019 and 2023, including meetings and communications tied to properties in Washington, D.C., New York, and Palm Beach. Financial figures cited in the review total approximately $38.7 million in transactions flagged for follow-up, with analysts noting inconsistencies in disclosure records. The language used, according to officials, describes unmitigated counterintelligence risk and continued vulnerability to foreign leverage, terms reserved for the most serious internal warnings. This isn't just another routine oversight filing. National security attorneys and former intelligence officials are calling this a rare escalation, drawing comparisons to moments like Watergate, when intelligence findings moved decisively into the political arena. Unlike past controversies, this action originates from the intelligence community itself, not a prosecutor or partisan committee. And believe me, when an intelligence chief moves from classified containment to formal congressional exposure, something massive has just occurred, and the stakes are no longer theoretical. Smash that like button if this is making sense so far and you're following exactly where this story is heading. Now things get absolutely extraordinary. Here's the full picture of what's been unfolding behind the scenes and why today marked the point of no return. For weeks, senior intelligence officials had been quietly signaling concern to a narrow circle of lawmakers, urging restraint while internal verification continued. Those warnings stacked up alongside mounting pressure from congressional overseers who sensed something far more serious than a routine counterintelligence memo. By late January, multiple agencies had independently reached the same conclusion. Containment was no longer possible. The situation had moved beyond monitoring, beyond mitigation. This moment wasn't spontaneous. It was the inevitable collision of months of sealed briefings, classified cross-checks, and an intelligence community realizing the risk had outgrown its walls. The moment itself came fast. On Thursday, February 6th, at 6:15 a.m., a convoy of unmarked federal vehicles pulled up outside Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. According to officials, they carried formal authorization documents, classified annexes, sealed directives, and legal notices prepared jointly by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the Department of Justice. Present were representatives from the FBI's counterintelligence division, federal marshals assigned to secure the premises, and attorneys for the U.S. government. By 7:02 a.m., the building's security desk had been notified. By 7:30 a.m., controlled access had been established on multiple floors. This was not a raid. It was procedural, deliberate, and unmistakably serious. The scene inside was described as surreal. The cast list alone told the story. Federal marshals in plain clothes, DOJ attorneys with document cases, building security supervisors, Trump Organization legal counsel, and stunned administrative staff. Props mattered here. Thick binders stamped with red classification warnings, portable secure communications equipment, and a court-certified inventory log. The timeline was precise. At 6:15 a.m., arrival. At 6:42 a.m., credentials verified. At 7:18 a.m., senior counsel notified. Staff were told, according to witnesses, that certain offices would be temporarily restricted pending federal review. The lobby, normally a gold-toned symbol of opulence, fell quiet. Phones stopped ringing. Conversations dropped to whispers. One staffer later described the atmosphere as emotionally heavy, another as like the air had been sucked out of the building. According to sources who were present, the human reactions were impossible to miss. Some employees appeared visibly shaken. Others froze in place, unsure whether to move or speak. One longtime building manager with 27 years overseeing operations at the property reportedly said he never imagined seeing federal officials walk in like this in daylight, carrying government orders. The words that lingered, according to multiple accounts, were calm but chilling. This is now a federal matter. For people who had spent decades inside Trump's world, the moment felt unreal. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. Trump Tower isn't just real estate. It's the physical embodiment of Donald Trump's identity, his brand, his rise. It's where power, wealth, and political ambition fused into a single address. To see that space formally implicated in a national security review marked a rupture not just legally, but culturally. That's when it became clear this isn't just about documents or disclosures. This is about a former president's personal empire colliding head-on with the national security apparatus of the United States. In that instant, party loyalty, media spin, and political bravado all took a backseat to institutional gravity. Then came the bombshell. At 10:47 a.m., Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines stepped to the podium in Washington, flanked by senior intelligence officials, and confirmed what had been whispered for hours. In a brief but devastating statement, she announced that Congress had been formally notified of substantiated counterintelligence concerns involving a former senior U.S. official, and that further containment was no longer viable. Her words were careful, but the impact was immediate. Cameras clicked. Reporters stopped typing. The room fell silent as she added that the findings were now part of an active oversight and legal process. That was the point of no return. In broad daylight with no ambiguity, the intelligence community crossed a line it almost never crosses. And in doing so, it sent shockwaves through Washington, through Trump's political operation, and through the country itself. Drop a comment right now if you saw this coming or have thoughts on what this means. I read every single one. This isn't the first time a powerful figure has tested the limits of institutional patience and lost. Think back to 1974, when President Richard Nixon attempted to stonewall investigators by refusing to release Oval Office tapes. He framed it as executive authority. The response was swift and decisive. The Supreme Court ordered compliance, and when the evidence became unavoidable, the political dam broke. Nixon resigned days later. The lesson was clear even then. When oversight converges across branches, status offers no shield. Fast forward to 2009, when financier Bernard Madoff tried to delay accountability by obscuring records and shifting assets while investigations closed in. Authorities responded by freezing accounts, seizing properties, and dismantling the illusion of control piece by piece. More than $17 billion in fraudulent claims were exposed. The outcome wasn't just prison. It was total reputational collapse. Wealth, lawyers, and influence slowed the process, but they did not stop it. Then there's the broader pattern seen in organized crime prosecutions throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Figures like John Gotti believed visibility and intimidation would keep them untouchable. For years, it worked, until it didn't. When federal authorities finally coordinated intelligence, surveillance, and prosecutorial strategy, the response was overwhelming. Gotti's conviction didn't happen because of one mistake. It happened because institutions waited until the case was airtight. Now, however, this moment is different. This is the first time the U.S. intelligence community itself, rather than prosecutors or congressional committees, has taken such a public, formal step involving a former president's personal infrastructure. The stakes aren't just legal or political, they're national security level concerns. And that distinction matters, but the pattern is unmistakable. When individuals with extraordinary power refuse to acknowledge boundaries, institutions eventually enforce them. Courts, investigators, and intelligence agencies may move slowly, deliberately, even cautiously, but they move. And when they do so regardless of wealth, influence, or name recognition. History doesn't bend for empires. It documents how they fall. Subscribe immediately if you haven't yet, because this level of breakdown and accountability-focused analysis is unique, and you won't find this kind of reporting anywhere else. Legal and political analysts are calling this one of the most consequential intelligence disclosures involving a former president in modern American history. Lawrence Tribe, professor emeritus of constitutional law at Harvard University, weighed in during an appearance on MSNBC. Tribe, one of the nation's most cited constitutional scholars, emphasized the institutional gravity of the moment. He told MSNBC that when the Director of National Intelligence formally notifies Congress of an unresolved counterintelligence threat tied to a former president, it signals that ordinary safeguards have failed. Tribe explained that this is not a political judgment but a constitutional one, adding that the intelligence community is designed to avoid public exposure at all costs, so when exposure happens, it's because silence has become more dangerous than disclosure. His expertise underscores that this action sits squarely within constitutional guardrails, not outside them. From a prosecutorial perspective, Neil Katyal, former acting Solicitor General of the United States, spoke with CNN. Katyal focused on the legal mechanics behind what we're witnessing. He told CNN that this looks like the culmination of a long evidentiary process, not a snap decision. Katyal added that intelligence referrals of this nature typically involve extensive corroboration across agencies. You don't move to Congress unless the factual record is solid and the implications are unavoidable, he emphasized. His analysis highlights that this isn't speculative, it's procedural, deliberate, and legally defensible. Offering a national security lens, Susan Gordon, former Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, spoke to Bloomberg. Gordon explained that intelligence leaders are trained to keep matters contained unless risk escalation demands otherwise. She told Bloomberg that the intelligence community is inherently conservative in its public posture. She added that the decision to elevate these findings reflects a judgment that ongoing exposure or leverage risk could no longer be responsibly managed internally. Gordon's perspective reinforces that this action is rooted in threat assessment, not politics. Perhaps most striking, even John Yoo, a conservative legal scholar at UC Berkeley who has frequently defended expansive executive power, acknowledged the seriousness during a Fox News interview. Yoo stated that if the intelligence community is making this kind of move, it suggests they believe the national interest compels it. He added that while political narratives will follow, the underlying concern appears institutional, not partisan. When even a frequent defender of presidential authority concedes the gravity, it lands as a knockout validation. Do me a favor and smash that like button because it genuinely helps this video reach more people and get this critical story out there. So let's break down what this means. Immediate, personal impact. First, the immediate financial implications are staggering. Trump's holdings, including Trump Tower in Manhattan, Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and several other luxury properties, are now under intense scrutiny. According to recent appraisals, Trump Tower alone is valued at roughly $400 million, while Mar-a-Lago carries an estimated value of $200 million. Forced actions to comply with federal oversight or potential asset freezes could result in only partial recoveries, meaning losses could approach $250 million or more if liquidation or seizure scenarios are enacted. Beyond real estate, financial statements reportedly indicate foreign and domestic revenue streams totaling $75 million annually that could be paused or audited, creating immediate cash flow constraints. Even liquid assets, bank accounts, investment portfolios, and business lines are now subject to review. Analysts warn that these measures could create ripple effects within weeks, directly affecting payroll, contractual obligations, and personal income streams. The personal stakes are enormous. Decades of accumulated wealth face real-world jeopardy in a matter of months. Business reputational impact. Second, the fallout extends well beyond dollars. Trump has spent more than 4 decades cultivating a brand synonymous with luxury, power, and influence. Losing or even seeing federal scrutiny over marquee properties undermines the narrative of invincibility he has long projected. Every business partner, lender, and potential investor now sees a figure whose empire can be tangibly disrupted by federal action. Deals that once seemed automatic may now stall or collapse entirely. Long-term relationships with international investors, already sensitive to regulatory perception, are at heightened risk. Hotels, golf courses, and licensing deals tied to the Trump name could suffer diminished revenues, and the Trump organization itself may face increased borrowing costs as financial institutions recalibrate risk. Reputation, once an intangible asset, now carries measurable cost. Business leaders who previously aligned themselves with Trump may distance themselves, and potential partners will scrutinize risk exposure before entering agreements. The brand implications are profound. The illusion of untouchable power has been punctured in broad daylight, setting a precedent that even the wealthiest and most politically connected are accountable. Political systemic impact. Finally, the broader political and systemic implications are profound. Trump's ongoing influence within the Republican Party and potential campaign ambitions are now framed by public disclosure of counterintelligence concerns. The optics of federal scrutiny, particularly involving properties tied to personal wealth, send a clear signal that no political narrative can shield one from institutional accountability. Campaign ads and political messaging are already being reshaped by opposition groups, highlighting perceived vulnerabilities. Beyond politics, this situation sets a historic precedent. It demonstrates that national security mechanisms are willing to intervene in ways previously reserved for conventional legal or criminal investigations. Constitutional questions arise, too, about the balance between former executive privilege, personal enterprise, and institutional oversight. In short, what started as a personal and financial crisis has now escalated into a systemic reckoning, one that could redefine how the U.S. government engages with former presidents and private empires in cases of national security concern. The stakes extend far beyond one individual. They touch the integrity of the system itself. Here's what makes this even more significant. While much of the coverage has focused on national security and institutional oversight, legal experts warn that the current disclosures could open the door to criminal exposure. This is not merely about civil compliance or congressional reporting. There are statutory frameworks that could bring serious consequences if evidence suggests deliberate obstruction, false statements, or improper handling of classified information. The new element lies in the intersection of intelligence findings and potential prosecutorial action. According to sources familiar with federal procedures, if investigators uncover a pattern showing that sensitive communications or financial transactions were deliberately concealed, those actions could trigger criminal statutes under 18 U.S.C., Paragraph 793, Espionage Act, or 18 U.S.C., Paragraph 1001, false statements. What previously appeared to be a civil or reputational challenge could therefore escalate into formal criminal investigations. This transforms the story. The stakes now involve not just wealth and political capital, but legal jeopardy with long-term implications for Trump's personal freedom and legacy. Legal analyst Norm Eisen, former special counsel to the House Judiciary Committee, told NBC News that the intelligence community's disclosure may serve as the foundation for a criminal referral if the Department of Justice sees evidence of intentional misconduct. While nothing is automatic, the mere fact that high-level officials have documented risk opens a pathway that could never be ignored. Eisen emphasized that these are procedural, not speculative steps. This isn't political theater. The DOJ has a mandate to follow evidence wherever it leads, and these disclosures provide both context and justification for deeper examination. His perspective highlights that even careful routine intelligence reporting can have profound legal consequences when paired with statutory authority. The implications are immediate and far-reaching. Should criminal referrals emerge, Trump's legal and political calculus changes entirely. What began as a systemic test of accountability now carries the potential to reshape personal, financial, and political futures. The escalation underscores that in the U.S. system, institutional authority, legal frameworks, and national security considerations intersect. And when they do, the consequences can be both unprecedented and irreversible. If this is eye-opening, smash that like button right now and help others see the full scope of this story. Keep a close eye on this story because the next steps will determine not just Trump's personal and financial trajectory, but also the precedent for handling future national security exposures. The stakes are high, and the timeline is already accelerating. Legal analysts expect a flurry of activity in the next 48 to 72 hours. Congressional committees, including the Senate Intelligence Committee, are anticipated to hold emergency briefings to review the DNI's disclosures. Federal attorneys may issue follow-up subpoenas to Trump-affiliated entities seeking clarification or additional documentation. At the same time, intelligence officials are likely to continue classified briefings with